Welcome to another episode of Mystic-Skeptic Radio. On today's show, we have my friend David Josef Volodzko. Last time you were here, you said pretty controversial things, and I'm actually tired of excuses. With the assault on Gaza, the Trump's behavior, all the lunatics that support him, all the stuff. I'm fed up, and it seems like you're a little fed up too with your latest article regarding the ICE killings of the two civilians who were either protesting, standing in the way, or whatever way people want to frame it. What has changed for you to take a little stronger stance against the Trump administration's current tactics of deportation?
Well, I think that any violation of civil liberties has to be, you can't tolerate that. I think that his rhetoric, some of the rhetoric that has come from the White House is repulsive. Instead of coming out afterwards and trying to turn the temperature down, I saw quite the opposite. In fact, terms like domestic terrorist, when there seems to be absolutely no evidence for that whatsoever. Pretti, for example, Alex Pretti had a license to carry, and he was filming agents at the time, which is a perfectly legal thing to do. If you really want to nitpick it, you could say that he was a little resistant initially because he didn't just leave the street, and there was a struggle when the agents came upon him. He did not just collapse to the ground, but sure, okay, fine. Sure, there was some resistance, but an officer has to feel that their life is either in danger or that they are in imminent threat of bodily harm in order to justify lethal force. Now, there could be some confusion there. I mean, we don't really need to pick apart the milliseconds of the video. Like there was a gun may have gone off as a Sig Sauer P320 9mm, which is it's known for misfiring. So it could have misfired, and the other agents could have freaked out when they heard that. There's other possibilities, but still, at the end of the day, even if they are legally exonerated, there's still the tactical question as to whether or not that was just intelligent law enforcement, even if they say that they felt that they were in harm such that they needed to use lethal force. And then there's the moral question, which I don't. I think what happened was immoral. So that's
David, are you
yeah,
familiar with Blackwater?
yeah.
So I was following Blackwater when they were going into Iraq as mercenaries, and they were usually part of envoys taking military personnel from one area to another, or some ambassador or somebody, and they would just run over people, shoot people, do whatever the heck they wanted, and they had immunity. Do you think that that's what's been the orders that have been given, and the type of carpet blanche that the administration has done with these new recruits to ICE? Because a lot of the progressives are saying that it's setting up for a secret police or some type of um, regime that will keep Trump in power.
No, I don't think so. I think that's hyperbolic. Um, in fact, I don't think that what we're seeing is particularly unusual with regard to ICE. I think that a lot of that rhetoric is uh, political, by which I mean that it's people that hate the Trump, and they hate what Trump is doing and everything that he stands for, and they thought he was Hitler long before any of the news that we're seeing with ICE, and so now when I hear the same people saying that ICE is Gestapo, you know, it's part of that larger analysis. I don't think that what ICE is doing here is, well, I have two opinions about this. So in the piece that I wrote, I did quote an immigration lawyer who talks about how he feels that this new cohort of ICE agents are particularly brutish in certain ways. And so I wanted to include that commentary. But at the same time, if you look at some of the stats, I mean, it's not if you look at it as like the number of killings, let's say, per arrests, or there's not really data on encounters, but per arrests, and then you compare that to other law enforcement agencies, and the numbers are actually quite low. And if you look at, let's say, what Obama did and the number of deportations, ICE agents were not, they didn't exactly have a gentle touch back then. They could be quite brutal at that time. People got hurt, people got shot, people were brutalized, people were put in detention centers that were filthy and disgusting. Homan was in charge of it all, and he was given a medal. And now people are calling him a Nazi. And I think, if you scale up ICE operations largely enough, just because of the nature of ICE and the fact that the kind of people that are drawn to it, let's be honest. Like, I'm not saying this is true of all ICE agents, of course, but within their ranks, you do have people who are drawn to the work because they're drawn to that kind of enforcement power, and maybe also because they're drawn to policing uh, immigrants, dark-skinned immigrants. There's racist guys who are drawn to that kind of thing. So there are always going to be those elements in and there's, I don't know what we could do. I don't think we can ever get to a perfect system. We should strive for a perfect system, but I don't think we're going to reach a system where there's just zero incidents of police abuse or law enforcement abuse. And if you scale up whatever that percentage is, you scale up to a nationwide operation as massive as we have now, you're going to see more abuses. That's one factor. So the question for me is, okay, but is the prevalence rate increased? It doesn't seem that it has. Actually, it seems like it might have actually gone down compared to Obama. And then the other thing to keep in mind is that it seems as if, well, actually, it's a fact. It doesn't seem. It's a fact that these conflicts are taking place in maybe three counties out of the 3,140 some counties in the country. And in the other counties, we're not hearing headlines from other places. And keep in mind, Renee Good was blocks away from where Alex Pretti was killed. This is not like opposite ends of the country. It's all concentrated in one very small area. So there's something unique in the interactions there that doesn't seem to be happening anywhere else all over the country, where there are, I mean, the number of encounters and deportations. I mean, the numbers are, the White House claims that they've deported 677,000 people. I think I've seen other numbers that put it more like around 300,000, but still massive numbers we're talking about here. And the number of encounters could be in the millions. And so even one death is too many, of course, but there's been five, and one of them was a guy who was simply fleeing. That's not justified. One of them was Good. One of them was Pretti. One of them was a gentleman who was firing a rifle at his agent. So that's self-defense. And one of them was someone who was trying to drag an agent with his car, kill him. So that's self-defense. So I would say three killings total out of millions of encounters. And of the three killings, two of them are blocks away from each other. So what is so unique about Minnesota? Is it the intensity of ICE's operations? Is it that they have different tactics in Minnesota? Is it something about the protest culture in Minnesota? Is it a combination of all of the above? Is it maybe the rhetoric of Trump? I think it is. But also, I think there's a problem with the rhetoric of the Democratic leadership in Minnesota, Waltz and Frey. I don't think they've been turning the temperature down. I don't think either side has been turning the temperature down. I think everyone has been irresponsible in the way that they've been turning the whole thing into a powder keg, frankly. And I don't see that in other. You only see the conflict. These 9 counties where there's conflict, they're non-cooperative counties, and that's a problem. And in other places like Tennessee, like the vast majority of ICE arrests are taking place at prisons. They go to the prisons and they get people who have committed crimes there illegally, as opposed to doing these operations where they're walking down the street and going to places where they think that individuals are likely to be, and then asking around, and then having these street interactions with activists, which is a very clumsy way to go about the whole thing in the first place.
It
So
is. So somebody in Democracy Now! Was comparing what happened during the civil rights movement, but that it is backwards. So in the civil rights movement, you had the federal government um, leading or protecting, escorting African Americans into mostly white schools because the law had been passed in favor of them being integrated. In this instance, you have the local government pushing back against the federal government, um, supposedly enforcing federal law regarding illegal immigration. And they're saying um, they're at a disadvantage if the governor, the mayor, whoever say we don't want to be involved in this um, aggressive approach for whatever reason. But the more you talk about it, it just sounds like provocation. It sounds like I hate Tim Walz because he's tampon Tim or whatever. I'm gonna go mess with him. I hate the Somalis because of Ilhan Omar. We're gonna go mess with them. I hate the Haitians because they're black and they're a different culture, so we're gonna accuse them of killing pets, which everybody loves in America. It's just he's so sloppy and ridiculous that he does these very optic based raids and things like that that don't even make any sense. If he really wanted to stop illegal immigration, he would go to the businesses that hire them, the farms and the corporations that are using them, and find and arrest all the people that benefit from illegal immigration and treat people like slaves. It's all like show. And when you bring on Obama, I could care less about the Democrats, and I hate the tit for tat stuff. Both parties want to show off as tough on crime so they can lure centrists and moderates to vote for them. So, is this really the right way to go about um, showing that the government actually is doing something, or do you believe it's going to backfire, and now you're going to have people either lose interest in the Republican Party because of Trump's shenanigans, or create a type of panic that I wish was happening, where people are going to say, well, if they can do that for them, they can do that against us for whatever reason. Because the one thing that I found scary during the Black Lives Matter protest, it wasn't that they were burning stuff or throwing bricks or whatever, as the conservatives try to claim, is that there was a secret police, Homeland Security officers with hoods, with black vests, with Punisher logos and patches, snatching people, and then you would find out that they released them 3 weeks later. That's the kind of stuff that is disturbing. That you have mass officers and claims of doxing or whatever make it seem that now you have people going around with impunity doing things and you don't even know who they are, and they're shoving people just like some police riot police has done in the past, where they if you just happen to pass by or if you confront them, now your life is at risk, where they can break your skull on the concrete. This, do you think that's too much for Americans to be able to endure?
Mm, I mean, I don't think it's too much in the sense that I don't think that the whole country is going to just like, implode or something, or I don't think that we're going to have civil war. I don't think that, but I do think that, I think that is, I haven't read this article you're referring to on Democracy Now, but I think that the kind of rhetoric that says that this is, literal fascism, I think is hysterical. I think that what we're seeing is authoritarian in nature, which is different than fascism. ICE is not slaughtering millions of people. For one thing, like I said, they've killed 3 people, not in self-defense, but wrongfully killed 3 people. Okay, so comparisons to the Gestapo are just idiotic. Um, But maybe some people are using that because what they mean to say is that it's sort of this authoritarian abuse and they don't mean a literal apples to apples comparison with the Gestapo, but they're using the word anyway. Okay, fine. Like I'll grant some leeway with the metaphor. That's fine. As far as masks, that is not something that American people should tolerate. You have people like Rusmania Ozturk, who had a bag thrown over her head for writing an article. Unsealed documents that recently come out show that the only reason that they did that, as well as for Mahmoud Khalil and Mahdawi as well, was simply because they had opinions that the government didn't like. And then she gets a bag thrown over her head this is Colombia or something, or I shouldn't even say Colombia, like this is Venezuela or something. I mean, this is or Russia. This is America. This is not how things are supposed to be. Americans should not tolerate that. You should not be allowed to wear a mask. That is a deal breaker. How do I know if you come up to me wearing a mask and you don't identify yourself and you don't have a badge? How do I know that you're not a bunch of gangsters and I shouldn't pull a gun on you? And now I'm going to get shot and I'm dead for pulling a gun on a police officer because I didn't know, because they didn't. It's so fundamental to to our justice system that police officers have to identify themselves. You don't get to wear a mask. Now, on the other side of the argument is that you have these activists who are trying to dox officers and who are saying things like, well, these ICE agents, they have kids, and that's disgusting and evil. I don't care. I don't care what an officer does. I don't care if they kill people. You don't go after the children. Like you don't like if they were in Germany, if it was literal Nazis, you don't go after the children. But so that's the reason that they feel the need to wear these masks and protect their families and protect themselves. I still do not think it is excusable if that's the way you feel. If you feel like that's too much of a risk and you want to wear a mask, find another job. If you want to enter law enforcement as a public servant, well, you need to identify yourself. The public needs to know that you're there as a public servant to serve and protect, to serve and protect. You are not a stormtrooper or soldier against the people. You don't get to cover yourself up, and you don't, so you have to announce your presence. You have to identify yourself that you're law enforcement. You have to show your face. So that's a big no for me. That's completely inexcusable. And there's other things, there's other tactics that we talk about that I find completely inexcusable that I've seen. There's a lot of bad behavior that I'm seeing. But on, I think it also needs to be said that I don't know the numbers offhand on how many total ICE agents we have, but you know, there's a lot of other work being done as well. The vast majority of the work being done is not of the nature of shooting Alex Pretti. Again, 3 people, not 300,000 people.
Hold on. I I just found an article from The Guardian that says that 32 people have died in ICE detention.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're only worried about white people being shot because they're protesting or intervening in these raids, then that's a very narrow perspective. The immigrants who have died is the same amount of immigrants that died in 2004, and that was the record of deaths during the Bush administration.
Mm-hmm.
So they're all culpable of neglect, lack of oversight, lack of medical treatment, all kinds of human right violations when it comes down to immigrants. And during your past interviews with me, we were playing the numbers game and we're saying, well, if there's a million detainees and 5 of them die, then that's comparable. But it's like it's just the way they're going about it is really the problem, because if there is such an issue as the immigration is getting out of control and there's people coming in and out and we don't know who they are and stuff like that, you would think that the most powerful and technologically advanced country in the world would have a better system than Israel. In Israel, and this is why a lot of people think that October 7th was kind of a botched situation, is that there's satellite and all kinds of other recognition and surveillance stuff going on within Israel, within the Palestinian territories, all around, because such a contested place, You would think that in the border and the people that are coming in and out, legal or illegal, there would be a better management of the situation. So when conservatives say, well, Biden was letting them in because he wanted to change the population or the voters, stuff like that, I actually wonder if that might be true and there might be some evidence of it because the government has so much power and so much technology that they purposely don't keep good records on immigrants because they want to exploit them. Or the big corporations give them money so then they can not go after them, but keep using them for slave labor.
Mhm.
So, can do you agree with my assessment that there has to be a better way to manage people coming in and out. And when people bring up human trafficking and smuggling and all that stuff, of course, nobody wants that to happen. But even Houston, where I live, is the number one human trafficking capital of the world. So why are they not addressing that and focusing on the victims of human trafficking versus going against moms and dads who are working in Minnesota? You know, as an immigrant, why would anybody even go to Minnesota? The only reason people go to Minnesota is because they have family there.
Mhm.
It's so cold and inhospitable. And do they have a deal with the Somalis over there, like they did in in other areas with the Asian population in Boston or in California? Like, do you know the history of why there's Somalis? And is it because of a liberal environment that is more open to immigrants? Like, why that area?
Um, why specifically Minnesota? You're asking me? Why are Somalis in Minnesota?
Yeah, and why go after them? Is it because they're not organized? Is it because of Ilhan Omar? Is it because they don't
Oh
know
no,
what the hell they're doing?
I think it's quite obvious that the reason that there's some focus on the Somali population is because of the fraud scandal. I mean, that's why it hit the news. That's why everyone knows about it is because of the fraud scandal. Now you could say what you want about the veracity of the fraud scandal. I mean, like people who criticize some of the reporting on that or whatever, but that is the reason that the attention is on the Somali community is because of the insane levels of fraud, like record breaking levels of fraud. We don't even know how much yet. So that's why there's attention there. As for the people dying in detention, just to go back to that real quickly, that's muddier. The analysis of that is muddier than something like Alex Pretti being shot, 10 times in 5 seconds. Um, because a lot of those deaths are natural causes. And none of them are executions in the way that you could say that Pretti was. And then with the natural causes, you could say, okay, well, that's according to the authorities. Well, who knows what really happened? Sure, okay, maybe. I mean, yeah. And I know that a lot of people probably feel like they're not going to extend any trust to uh, ICE authorities saying the natural causes, and there's like, I don't trust any of that. Fine, but that just means that it's a gray area. Then you can't make a claim that they were actually like killing these people. So I don't compare those numbers to the numbers of 3, where we know for a fact people were killed, like they were actually killed by ICE. That's very different for me. I think it should be different for everyone. So and also another thing I would say is just that when you talk about like we don't want trafficking, so then why are they going after moms and dads? Well, but they're going after the traffickers. They are going after the traffickers. We already have arrest records of some of the people out now. When we look at the total number of people that have been arrested, and the total number of people in detention and that have been deported, I have not found data to break that down to see exactly how many. I've seen some reporting on what percentage of individuals that have been arrested had criminal records, and I've seen some. I've seen a range of reporting on that. So some of the data I saw is conflicting with other data that I see, and it unfortunately it seems to depend on the political orientation of the news source that you're looking at. Of course, as that's just become like a common fact of our life in America. So, but we do know for a fact that you know child rapists, drug traffickers, human traffickers, murderers, violent gang members are being arrested by ICE right now. And It's not happening very common, but we do know that some activists in Minnesota are trying to thwart ICE attempts to arrest those individuals, as well as everybody generally. But those individuals, I think that's a real stain on the activist community. And the only defense that I think you can mount for them in an instance like that is to say that perhaps not all of them happen to know the nature of the operation and who the individual is, that they're a child rapist, for example. Well, they didn't know that. Okay, well, you don't know who any of them is that they're going after, so maybe don't obstruct justice. It's fine to object to an innocent person being arrested, but if they're going out there and they're arresting truly evil individuals, it's one thing to have a criticism that they're arresting other people also, and you don't want that to happen. You don't want people who are not those vile criminals to be arrested as they're also arresting those people. That's a reasonable position to take. But there's also a lot of people whose position is cancel ICE, abolish ICE, suspend operations. Okay, and just accept the existence of these individuals, these psychopaths in our society, child rapists and human traffickers and murderers.
David.
I don't think the American people should have to accept that. And also, I think it's important to remember that the American people elected Trump. One of the main reasons that they did that was the issue of immigration.
Okay, so let's talk about that because I shared with you my conversation with another guest. We're gonna share with our audience your perspective first and then his. You're a journalist. You are someone who actually looks at data. My friend who has been on the show multiple times is an activist, I guess, for all kinds of interesting out of the norm perspectives, and he has a very strong MAGA perspective. So he was saying that the people that I abhor, um, Miller, Gorka, and Bannon, were all fantastic, and this was my response to him because it all goes back to them. But even before that, you had Buchanan, you had Rush Limbaugh, and you had Alex Jones prepping the American public to start believing their ridiculous claims that there's invasions coming from all sides. There's a Chinese invasion coming from Canada. There's a Latin American invasion coming from the South. There's terrorists and other, operatives, whatever coming through as well. So my contention is that Trump is pushing these conspiracies as fact from a xenophobic Jew like Miller, um, Gorka, who is a white supremacist, actual Nazi that came from his country with Nazi symbols on his lapel. And then you have Bannon, who says that people should be proud of being called Nazis and white supremacists. Those are the guys who are pushing this agenda to get rid of the 11 million or more undocumented immigrants. So let's say that there is a problem of too many undocumented immigrants. But you have people who are conspiratorial, who are racist, who are hateful, leading the charge. And that's why Miller said, go to Home Depot and start grabbing these folks. And now they're grabbing Native Americans. They're grabbing U.S. citizens who are Latinos. They're grabbing refugees from Vietnam and Laos who have been here for 40 years since the Vietnam War or longer. And like you said, they were going after Middle Eastern activists and writers uh, because they didn't like their political speech. So how can I trust that when I go to the Hispanic side of town, I'm going to be treated fairly? My constitutional rights are going to be protected, and I'm going to be given respect and human dignity when you have lunatics pushing this agenda, telling their officers they can pretty much do whatever they want, and that they will back them up because there's an invasion. And what my friend kept on saying was that people that don't integrate into American society are invading our culture, and they should be targeted for their lack of compliance, which you can use Europe or whatever other places as examples of how that has become destructive. But that's the kind of premise that is being used. So it's more than just being tough on crime. Now is uh, extirpating, deporting the people that you don't like because of whatever conspiracy theory you have that they're changing the makeup of the Americans. There's too many darkies or whatever. Like that's the kind of that is very stuff that is very disturbing.
Um, yeah, I personally wouldn't use a word like invasion. I think it's very problematic. You're just putting everybody who's coming in together as if they're an enemy. However, I think what people are pointing to when they use the word is the massive influx of people that are not wanted. And by what I mean by that is that they're coming in illegally. They're not coming in legally. So they're breaking our laws to get here. And that's what they're calling an invasion. Unprecedented levels under Biden, 11 million, unlike anything that was ever happened in my entire
There was
lifetime.
11 million before, so now there's 22 million.
Well, 11 million came in under Biden, right? So I don't know about 11 million before. I think it was more like, what was it, under Obama? It was something like 4 million. No, I think actually he may have even broken even. He deported quite aggressively, actually. So I've traveled all over the world. This is the thing that sort of disturbs me. One of the many things that disturbs me about this entire thing is a lot of things. We've already covered some of them, but like one of the things that disturbs me about this discourse in America. I've been to a lot of different countries in my life. The notion that someone is illegally in your country, like in many of the places I've been, the police come, they get you, they deport you, they put you on a flight, they send you out, and they charge you for the ticket, and they don't get you, you know, a cheap flight either. And here it seems to be that half the country thinks that it's inhumane to deport people. If you're here illegally, I don't have a problem with you being deported. The strain on our criminal justice system, the strain on our healthcare system, the strain, just variety of avenues of life. I don't think that there's any reason why Americans should have to tolerate having millions and millions of illegal people just break our laws and walk right in, because it's essentially it's economic. Refugees is one thing, asylum seekers is a different issue, so I'm not talking about that right now. I'm talking about like economic migrants, people who they break down your door and they move into your house because they say, well, you have a nicer house, I'd like to live there. Well, I'm sorry, that's not okay. Get out. You have to get out right now.
Well,
Like
but your
people can't just.
analogy is kind of goofy because let's say you invite them in and you say, "Hey, from now on, you're going to be my slave. But if you ever misbehave, I'm going to kick you out." That's pretty much the way that American society works. They are
I
usually
mean,
very kind to their servants, but as a group, they don't like them. When I
how
used
did
to work
we
as a legal assistant for an immigration law firm, my boss, who's one of the best in Houston, told me most owners of mansions, they come to me and they say, "What can we do for Rosa?" But when you ask them, "Why are you willing to give a visa to Rosa and not her to her family?" They would say, "Well, Rosa, I don't know who the hell she came with." So this idea that I am invading your house by coming in, what are the incentives for people to come in? That their countries are messed up and that here they can work and have access to a better life.
yeah,
So the
economic migrant.
analogy is
Yeah,
you're making everybody a criminal when
they are criminals if they come illegally.
it's a civil crime. It's not a federal crime like these schmucks
Yes,
and Bush were trying to pass in 2007. So
yes.
so if people don't know the difference between a civil crime and a federal crime or a civil crime and a criminal crime, you have to be able to differentiate because crossing the border without permission is one thing, working without permission is something else, and then going around and not following the laws of the land are that's a third thing.
Mm-hmm.
So we use these very broad analogies. I actually spoke to a Holocaust survivor and I said, "Do you think that it is possible to compare what you guys went through in Poland and Germany to what immigrants go through here?" And she said, "Well, the difference was that
No.
we were German. We were born there. And it's like, okay, so I'll give you that.
What?
But the issue
So
is this.
she said that other than the fact that they were born there, the rest is the same.
She kind of like I it took her aback for me to even make that analogy. You could say that I was a dumb college student to bring that up, but the question always goes back to if
Yeah, there's
you.
not a Holocaust happening in America of illegal immigrants. We're not genociding them. There's
That's
no
why
comparison.
deportation is problematic to some people because it means that for some reason just being born here gives you a privilege that someone else doesn't have. So it could be white guilt. That's fine. The question goes back to
What is white guilt?
that if all the progressives say we don't like people getting deported, is because they're saying, well, we didn't choose to be born here. We didn't choose to have access to legal work. These people are fighting for it or
Mhm.
striving for it, or that's the only way they could get here. Who
Right.
are we to deny them that right? So,
Yeah, that's a terrible
so I
argument.
know that you're not pro amnesty,
That's
and
a well, no, it's different than an amnesty argument. That to me sounds like an open borders argument.
okay,
Why do we have these benefits just because we're born here? Okay, so then anybody who's not born here could just come here. So then anybody in the world. So the open borders. If the argument is like I don't deserve this right just because I was born here, so then anybody who's not born here should have the same access that I have. Otherwise, it's not fair. Then what's the argument for stopping anybody from coming? That is open
well,
borders.
why is it that they get hired?
What do you mean?
If the biggest complaint, like you said, that they're a problem to the legal system, they're a problem to the medical care, they're a problem for
A
resources.
strain. Yeah, it's a sheer numbers game. I mean, there's
Okay,
so many people. I mean, we all just recently went through COVID, and
right.
we know from experience that during COVID, there was a big issue with hospitals not having enough beds. We have, in a crisis situation, we don't have enough nurses and enough doctors and enough beds to
You
take care
can't
of
blame that on
everybody.
immigrants. You can blame that on the medical system not being
Well, of course,
prepared.
you can blame that on immigrants to a degree
Okay,
because
so
we are strained to how many people we can take care of. So if there are people here who are not here legally, I don't want to create a system. I don't want to live in a society such that if an illegal immigrant shows up at the ER, they get turned away or the doctor says, show me your papers. We don't want to have a system like that.
let
So
me ask
what's
you
the
this.
alternative? Well, the alternative is therefore either we don't have enough, we're strained to take care of our own citizens, or we try to have some kind of reasonable limit on illegal immigration
So
immigration.
how
It
is it
seems like
not
the third one is the only one that really makes sense.
okay? If the quickest way to stop illegal immigrants from staying here because they stay because there's work. If there was no work, they wouldn't be here. They would go back to their countries. If the quickest way would be to come up with a system where you cannot work unless you have the right kind of ID that is federally provided or something like that. If
Right.
that would be the quickest way to do it, why don't we do that? The moment that we start saying that there is strain on the on society, then we're scapegoating because now you're saying
Well, that's not
that
scapegoating. I
it
mean,
it helps the invasion case because then you're saying not only are they a strain to the society, they're also a strain to our culture. They're also not assimilated. They're also this. They're also that. So it builds this greater case against them. If we were just say you can't work unless you have documentation that it is verifiable, and no, the moment we catch you going to Home Depot and just grabbing people and paying them out of pocket, you can't do that. It has to be through some type of regulation. Then you would have a riot because people are going to say, you can't tell me who I'm going to pay under the table or something like that. And the oil rigs here in Texas, they make sure that they can just hire anybody because they don't want to pay benefits. And then who pays for the benefits?
right.
When people get sick, all the taxpayers.
And
So
who suffers as a result? The American taxpayer who has to pay, or the American worker who can't get a job because the employers want to hire cheaper labor, illegal immigrants, for example. So it would be helping American workers to get those jobs if they didn't have that cheaper alternative. So that's just another argument for having a stricter immigration policy. There's nothing wrong. I mean, Americans, this is going back to my earlier point, Americans have fallen, or at least on the left, have fallen into this weird notion that like having immigration policy and enforcing immigration policy is somehow a bad thing. Like it is. there's few countries in the world that have that attitude. It's perfectly fine and reasonable to have immigration policy and enforce it and remove illegal immigrants. And if you want to come here legally, you're welcome to come here. It's wonderful. We're a nation of immigrants. We love it. But if you want to just break down the door because our house is nicer than yours, and I don't think that that is an unfair analogy whatsoever, because that is what we're talking about. If we're talking only about economic migration, we're talking about moving to a place because, as you said, it's a better life. It's nicer, not because you're fleeing death, not because you're, refugee and asylum seekers. As I said before, that's a different conversation. I'm not talking about that.
Let me ask you this.
But yeah.
As someone who has a Jewish ancestry, the Polish, German, Russian Jews that try to come to the U.S. via boat before World War II,
Mm-hmm.
or as the Nazis were rising in power, were told at the Galveston Bay or Massachusetts or whatever they ended up at, they said, "Sorry guys, the cap for Jews is only so many. Go back." Right now, there's a cap for Mexicans, Filipinos, Indians, and I forget the fourth country. So with that in mind, or China. So with that in mind, an economic refugee like me, who came here because the Mexican economy had tumbled. Um, the only way we could come is because my dad had been a resident when he was a child.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and back then they needed workers, so they were giving away green cards. So the policy changed, and suddenly we got in and no one else did. So these caps, a lot of times they seem to be based on race or be based on cultural connection to the so-called American lifestyle. So Trump is saying that South Africans can come in, or we want to take over Greenland because, in my eyes, because they're white, or we want, if you're Irish or Scandinavian, come on over. So I know that because you are more right, center right, you would say that a country has the right to decide what their population or their culture should look like. And you
Yes.
can say that Europe
That's not a
has,
right wing. That's not a right wing position, by the way.
in Europe, they have gone the other way, and now they have bigger problems because people won't assimilate and they want to take over and stuff like that. So, how do you who gets to decide that? That was my biggest issue with the veteran who was on our show yesterday. Who gets to decide who gets a cap and who doesn't? And in the 1930s, it was the Protestants, and they said we don't want any Jews. So you guys go handle your business in Europe, and a bunch of people died.
Well, that's
So,
different. You're comparing that to the situation now with who?
well, it goes back to you saying come legally. Can you come legally? Because if you really know immigration law, someone from Mexico would say, "Well, I want to come legally." Say, "Well, if you have $1 million, you can come in. But
Right.
if you can't get a H-1 visa, you can't come in. Or you can just get in line, and the line is all the way to Argentina."
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not saying that it forces people to do things illegally, but it discourages to follow the process, which to some of us is unfair. And you can say, well, we don't have to be fair, but it's like, yeah, but it's very privileged that.
No, I wouldn't say we don't have to be fair. I would say we are being fair. It is fair to say, too bad. You don't get to come live in my house just because you think it's nicer than your house. Too bad. And that's fair. That's perfectly fair.
But you're saying
Nothing
that it,
unfair about that. And you can't, hold on. You can't compare to Jews fleeing the Nazis. You can't compare that to somebody who wants to move from Mexico to the US because it's nicer. The Jews fleeing the Nazis, I think you might have been referring to the MS St. Louis, where they were on a boat and they came over here, they got turned away, and then many of them got slaughtered. Like, that's not the, like, Nazi Germany is not Mexico. They're not the same thing. And the phrase economic refugee is, it's kind of, I mean, that's not really a thing. An economic, if you're coming for economic reasons, then you're not a refugee. A refugee is someone who's fleeing for their life. If you're coming to America because you want a bigger paycheck or a nicer house, or you want to be able to put your kids into a nicer school, those are great things. I want those things too. But you don't have a right to those things, to break the laws of another country. Like, if I want, I think Japan is in many ways nicer than America. and they, in some ways, they have a, they're more peaceful, safer society. Maybe it would be nice for me to move there and let my kids live in a safer place where you can walk the cities at any hour. So I'm just going to break their laws and go there illegally and violate their immigration laws because I want to. That's not, and if they say no, we no, you have to go through the proper channels. That's perfectly fair for them to say that. And it is unfair and unreasonable for me to, it's so entitled to think that I just get to because I want to. Why does anybody, now again, for the third time, I will say, I am putting it, refugees and asylum seekers is a different category. But if we're just talking about people who are coming to America because they just want to enjoy a better life, you don't get to have that just because you want that.
Okay, so let's say that it's not you who are pushing people out of your house, but it's Trump, and he says if you're Scandinavian, come in, but if you're African, stay out. Is that a despotic thing to say?
Uh, well, we'd have to dig a little bit deep. I mean, uh, we'd have to dig a little bit deeper into the specific argument. Like, why is somebody saying those things? I think I know why Trump is saying those things, but if you're asking the more general question of is it okay for a country to pick and choose where populations come from? Yes, of course. Do you I would be interested to hear anybody who disagrees. Do you disagree? Do you think that the United States has some obligation to take equal numbers of people from all countries or something that we don't get to pick and choose? Because I don't think we want to take people from places where they're extremely violent or where they have cultural values that do not match with our cultural values. So, for instance, um, Somalia is a good example since that's in the news. And I'm not talking about later generation Somalis who have assimilated who are different. I'm talking about people who are coming from Somalia right now. I'll just give you a single statistic, but over 99% of the women in Somalia from the ages of about 16 to 49. And the only reason it's limited by that age group is because that's the age that they surveyed. It's obviously much younger, much older women also have had female, 99% of women from 16 to 49 have had, actually it's 99.4% have had female genital mutilation. Now there's three types of female genital mutilation, 1, 2, and 3. The most severe kind, which I am not going to describe for your listeners, you can go look it up for yourself, but it's it's so horrific and so disgusting that you will stop reading halfway through. It is nightmare fuel. And it's done with broken bottles and stuff like that. 99.4%. And the only reason that it's not higher is, well, sorry, I mean, the only reason that it's not the older age group is because they didn't include them in the survey. But those women, any of those women also, and younger than 16 too, because they marry as young as like 6 over there. So they're doing it to all of their women, these men. They're doing it to their mothers. It's, the men are approving it. There's no protests over this in that society. Okay. And so men are getting married. They're having this done to their wives. Brothers are approving of their sisters, sons of their mothers. All right. We have a different culture here in America. We are now on, what is it, fourth, fifth wave feminism. We had a Me Too movement. We have made progress in this area very much. How many people like that? How many men who think that it's perfectly okay to treat women like that and to butcher their bodies? Okay. How many of those kinds of men do we want to bring into our country? And if we do, and then we start to see certain types of crimes and abuses against women, should we be surprised? Europe has already run this experiment. And I'm sure you've seen the numbers of the rape rates in various European countries going through the roof.
Let,
Sweden used to be one of the lowest rape rates in the world. Now they have one of the highest rape rates of all in all of Europe.
can we use an example that we're a little more familiar with? Let's say South Africans. And Trump says, I want white South Africans who are being persecuted for being white over here. I don't want any black South Africans. Would you use the same rubric? The black South Africans haven't been able to keep the country going or whatever. The white South Africans were doing great until apartheid got tumbled, and now they're fleeing for their lives, and we need to give them refuge.
Hmm. To be honest, I think I would have to do some more analysis on the question. I don't know the kinds of statistics that I was just throwing out there about.
So that was a very extreme example. Women are being mutilated.
Yeah.
They have
Well, the example is meant to illustrate a single point, which is that there are societies where certain horrific practices are so rampant that a randomly selected person from that society is probably not somebody that we want in our society. Whereas, to take another example, Japan is such a peaceful society, and the people are so polite and so well educated that I think we could probably take any number of Japanese people that would want to come to America, and that would be a good thing. But if we took a whole bunch of people from a place like Somalia or Afghanistan, maybe, or so, like, let's say some place where the rates of violent crime are through the roof, just through the roof. If you bring in a lot of people from a place where they're doing a lot of violence, you're bringing the people don't like when they step over the border, they don't leave their behavior behind. They don't like get a new psychology. Their brains don't reset. So this is also why I said, we need to have a different conversation about second generation, third generation. Like when they have their kids, that's a different thing. That's a different conversation. But if you're
so
talking about bringing in large numbers of men from places that have extremely high rates of violence among men, what do you think is going to happen? So of course countries get to pick and choose who they want. Of course, that's just common sense. You
okay.
keep certain things out of your society. And
So I was
also, one last thing I'll say, if I may, it's not just about crime. Like this is a very extreme example, but it can also just be about what you might call cultural aesthetics. Like there's just certain way, like the Japanese, for example, they have a Japanese way of doing things. It's not just about keeping the crime rate low. They have a way that their society runs that they like, and they have every right to want to keep it like that. And this argument that it should be any other way, to my mind, as far as I could tell, only seems to operate, is mediated through a kind of racist uh, belief where it's okay to talk like that about predominantly white societies. Like, what's the problem if the values change? What's the problem if the percentage of let's say white people and their values or whatever goes down, right? And it's kind of racist to even have a problem with that at all. If you hear somebody say like the percentage of white people in Britain is collapsing, and with it are collapsing the values that were associated with that demographic, and people are coming from other parts of the world, and those values are coming in, and it's changing their life, it's changing their culture. And even if it's not increasing crime, it's changing their culture. And people might say, what are you racist? Why do you care about that? Okay, but then ask them, then would you be totally fine if a bunch of white people moved to Nigeria and Nigerians had to suddenly lose their culture and put up with like American culture? Would that be fine? And of course they're going to say no. No, that's not okay. Okay, so you're being a racist. You're saying that it's okay to do it to a particular racial group, but it's absolutely wrong to do it to any other racial group. Why is that? Well, I think the reason is because a lot of people have been sustained on a diet of far left ideology that says that white people are, colonizer oppressors, and so we need to, like, what is the phrase that we hear? We need to exterminate whiteness. We need to eliminate whiteness. This kind of rhetoric.
I've never heard that, but I'll give you that. And the reason that you and I are friends is because you bring some good points. But if you can give me 5 more minutes, I want to put a scenario and see if it follows with what you've said in the recent comments. So I come from a country where domestic violence is really high, and now there's a lot of drug trafficking, and there's the narco culture. But that stuff wasn't really there when I came in '95. It was always the macho thing. There was always the putting women down, the
Mm,
persecution of minority religions, persecution of LGBTQ communities.
mhm,
There was a lot of racism, which comes from the Spanish and the slave trade and the caste system.
mhm,
So the way that you portrayed Somalis, Afghanis, and other groups that are culturally different, there was a slight variation that was uncomfortable for me because you were saying that if the culture is messed up, if the religion mores, and because a lot of the stuff about genital mutilation comes from religious and cultural, backwards thinking. I had a friend who was a Christian, and his denomination broke off of the American version of Baptist because they were still doing genital mutilation of women. So if my culture has had a brutal past and
Mm-hmm.
still has vestiges of brutality, like the way that I would describe Mexico, that doesn't mean that I have anything to do with it. And this idea that the moment that you come to America, you have to become fully American, it's a misnomer because the American culture has a lot of bad things too. So whatever, I have a friend from Turkey, and he was saying that he doesn't like the way women are treated in Turkey. And even though he's a devout Muslim, he wants his children to bring in the best from their culture and the best from their religion to their life in the US. So in the same case for me, although Mexicans are known as wife beaters, although Mexicans are known as being a little loose with their morality and being domineering and having lower view of women and of other groups,
Mm-hmm.
that is not who we are. Like we are who we choose to be based on our values and our even spiritual perspectives. So to paint a whole group of people and a whole culture based on whatever research you've done on them or whatever statistics, stuff like that, can be very dangerous. And
Why is that?
well, the last example is going to be this. So I worked at a hospital, and every time that a African American or a Hispanic family came in, uh, and there was something weird with their child, like they hurt themselves and it's a little, suspicious. I was told to always assume that the family were abusive. And I said, that's interesting. Why would you do that with those two groups of people and not with the others? And they said, because statistically, it's always the case.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but my problem is kind of like the way the statistics are used by Nick Fuentes and people like that, whereas used as this, you know, generality that does not give people the benefit of the doubt. And I know that when you're dealing with large groups of people and you're dealing with criminals and stuff like that, you have to use some type of rubric and metric system or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so the it just goes back to what a lot of people misattribute to Martin Luther King in the sense of like, oh, I don't see color, I don't see race because it's the content of your character, but it's only when it's convenient. So to say if Somalis come over here, they need to stop hurting their women, that is a reasonable thing to demand from the Somali population. Just like there was a case where a Saudi family came and they had a female slave, and then it came out that there was their slave, and they said, well, that's our cultural thing. We have slaves. And they're like, yeah, we can't do that here. So there is a standard that America puts out for morality and for treatment, equal treatment of all the people that live here. So I have no problem with that. But I have a problem is with making these assumptions that because they're from Haiti, they eat cats or dogs or whatever. Or
Well,
because
yeah, that's a no, that's not what I said though. What I was citing, I mean, people can use statistics to generalize, but if 99.4% of a population is doing a specific act, that is not a generalization. Generalization is when is when you sort of you say that you make a claim that more people are doing it based on a smaller group. It's like you know that some people in Somalia eat fish, and so you say, man, Somalians, they all eat fish. That's a generalization. But if almost 100% of them are doing it, you're not generalizing anymore. That's just a fact. That is just the way it is. It's 99.4%. And I didn't say all, I said 99.4%. So I'm not even generalizing that last 0.6%. I'm just saying 99.4% of the women have had this, and there aren't protests against it. The men aren't rising up to stop this. The men are the ones doing it, actually. So it's not a generalization. And we don't want that here. And we don't want people who do that. So there's nothing wrong with us saying, no, thank you. That's not, it's different, I think, than the example you're giving with domestic violence in Mexico. I don't know the numbers offhand, so I can't be certain, but I'm willing to bet that it is not true that 99% of Mexican men are butchering their wives. That's just not true. And, you know,
Well, we do have the largest femicide in the whole world.
what
Um,
is the rate? I mean,
uh,
if it was astronomical, then yeah, there would be a reason to be concerned there also, because you don't want a bunch of men coming into your country who like to murder women. That's common sense. That's kind of obvious. So, but here's an important point that needs to be made in this conversation. Like, if you know that 99% or even 60% or whatever it is, some number of a population does this thing that you don't want, and it doesn't have to be mutilating women. It could just be some cultural practice that you just don't want that in your culture. Japan might say like, well, you know, we are a combination of Buddhist and Shinto, and we don't really want our society to be Islamified. We don't want that. It's just a preference. We're not saying that Islam is any less or anything like that, but it's not our thing and we don't want it. No, thank you. They have a right to say that if they want to. It's their society. If they want to be closed in that way, if they don't want diversity, I happen to think diversity is a wonderful thing, but I don't think that it's morally superior to the lack of diversity. I don't think Japan requires it in order to be a better country. They're a wonderful country just as they are, even though they don't have diversity. So it doesn't have to be this like horrible example. But the point that I wanted to make is just, if you have a population and a sufficiently high percentage of this thing, then you do not want to allow in a large population of people randomly selected, let's say, just coming into the country. However, you also do not want to use a statistic like that, even if it's 99%. You do not want to judge individuals and just say, well, you're from this country where a lot of people do this thing, therefore you must be doing that thing. That's completely illogical. That doesn't make sense. So you judge individuals individually, and you judge groups as a group. And so I'm all for having a policy where you judge individuals from any country, doesn't matter, Somalia or any other country. Someone comes, it's just like going back to the house example. Somebody comes to your house and they're not breaking down the door to come in illegally, but they knock on your door and they're like, hey, can I come over for dinner? You can make an individual judgment and be like, come on in, man. That's great. Like, yes, that's fine. Somalia, any other country, doesn't matter. The problem is we have so many people coming in right now that our ability to do that, to make those judgments and to vet people coming in, is just strained beyond anything, beyond our ability to be effective at that process. We need to rein it in so that we can effectively have that kind of measured individual assessment. That would be the ideal. I don't know if we would ever be able to get there, but like, ideally you'd be able to vet people individually and you'd be able to do it quickly enough that the line is not going to be so insanely long. But currently we are in a very different situation from that. Currently we're flooded with millions and millions of people coming in, and millions of people coming in illegally who are not being vetted whatsoever. And that's a real problem because a lot of people are coming from, this is the concern on the right, is that a lot of people are coming from places that are not the kind of people that we want coming to the country. We don't want that influence. We don't want those behavioral traits. We don't want some of those cultural aspects. And some of that is a matter of national security and safety and crime. Some of it is economic, and some of it is just, like I said, it's just a preference. It's nothing more than a preference. But it's okay for people to say, I like my hometown like this. Everyone in my hometown would prefer it to stay like this. And no, we don't want 600,000 Somalis moving into our hometown and completely transforming it. And now we have to listen to the call to prayer, 6 times a day. Like that's not.
I want to ask you a question to finish up. Who do you think is the smartest person living in the world right now?
Oh my gosh, I don't know. That's I guess probably, what's his name? Andrew Tao probably has a good claim. I might have said Christopher Langan, but I have some questions about the IQ test he took. What was it called? The mega test. And then, I think he took it twice, and you're not supposed to do that. So maybe Christopher Langan is supposed to have the highest IQ in the world, but I think maybe he doesn't. His IQ is not as high as reported. Andrew Tao, the mathematician, is supposed to have an extremely high IQ. I
So
think he
let's
took
say that both of these gentlemen were voted as president and vice president. Forget about uh,
okay.
their background.
Okay.
Do you think they would have a more smart and equitable and let's forget equitable, a smarter, more consistent and um, like better results with a issue like immigration than these three or four clowns that I mentioned, Miller, Bannon, Gorka, and Trump? That it to me it just seems that you have people who are not that clever, they're not that interested in human rights or even diplomatic relations with other countries or anything. They just want to hit everything with a hammer. You're gonna have all kinds of chaos and all kinds of possible, you know, whatever disturbing situations as
Mm-hmm.
compared to people who have actually some type of sophistication in their thinking.
I don't know. I get what you're saying. Like, and I think it's, it wouldn't be a great challenge. You wouldn't have to have a great mind to um to have a better approach. I think the biggest concern I have with the current administration's approach is not the actual ICE operations. As I said before, I think that it's roughly speaking pretty similar to what we saw under Obama. Now the coverage is different because everybody hates Trump in the media, and so anything that goes wrong is covered intensely. Whereas there were people killed under Obama, and I don't remember the coverage being this intense. I don't remember the protests. I don't remember any protests. I don't remember Obama being called Hitler. So that's part of the equation here. And then the rhetoric from the administration, as I mentioned earlier, like that's the thing where I think a smarter person would do better. And that's the main criticism I have of what's going on. Like after Pretti was shot, if Trump had come out and said something like, this, we're going to take this as seriously, we're going to take this as serious as a heart attack. We are going to investigate. And if we find that anything was done wrong, we are going to throw the book at them. We have a zero tolerance policy for that, blah, blah, blah. If he had just said something like that, it would have made all the difference in the world. It's a big deal what he says from where he sits. And instead, it seems as if they rushed to play defense for the agents. It is not their job to do that. I'm sure I know there will be an investigation, but he should have either struck a neutral tone, we're waiting for the facts, blah, 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 or a tone of zero tolerance. If we think that anybody's civil liberties is being violated, especially if it ends in a tragic death, we're aggressively against that, or something like that. But either neutral or against, but not immediately defensive. And they're domestic terrorists and that kind of stuff. So that's the big area where I think it would make a difference to have somebody a little more sophisticated. But the thing about smarter people is that that doesn't always mean that they have better politics. So I'm not necessarily convinced that having Andrew Tao as president would result in a better outcome, maybe just a different outcome, but differently bad. I don't put too much weight on IQ in things like that. I actually tend to think people with a slightly sort of like 140 range are best as politicians, not too smart. You fall into too many, you get derailed into too many sort of intellectual tangents, and really, really smart people are great as professors and not necessarily as politicians. So anyway, I'm going off on a tangent myself now. But the point is that I think that there's an like the way to do better here, if we're just focused on the Trump administration and what I think they could do better, is so easy. But it's also been the problem all along with Trump, right? It's the rhetoric, it's the way he talks about things. Like I was supportive, I critical but supportive of the capture of Maduro. Supportive in the sense that I had a lot of hope for what this could mean for the people of Venezuela and I have a lot of heart for what they're going through. and to see the worst, cruelest dictator in the entire Western Hemisphere removed from power. Now, there's, we could talk about the legal aspect. We could talk about the sure, but putting that aside for a second, just like I know Venezuelans personally, and they were weeping with joy when they learned that this little South American Hitler was finally gone. Um, and all Trump had to do was go up there in the wake of that and say, we have so much Americans, we have so much love for the Venezuelan people. We're so happy, and we hope that their democracy will be returned to them. And even if it was just lip service, he was just paying lip service to human rights. It would have meant something. Even when the president pays lip service to those things, it means something. But instead, what did he do? He talked about taking the oil. It's just like naked imperialistic language. So my main criticism is not necessarily that I would say we should not capture Maduro. We should not have aggressive ICE operations to remove violent, criminal, illegal immigrants, as well as a lot of other immigrants who shouldn't be here. One of my biggest criticisms is just like the demeanor, the rhetoric, the attitude that I'm getting off the administration is not, look, this is a big, complicated issue. We're doing our best. We're trying to reduce accidents, but we are trying to do what the American people elected me to do, which is address this problem. Instead, the vibe I'm getting is more like, well, can I curse on your show? It's more like, fuck around, find out. That's the attitude I'm getting off them. It's like, hey,
They say that if you don't do that, people don't respect you, and that's why he's giving shit to Greenland and shit to Denmark and everybody because they haven't taken the U.S. seriously so far. So we have to be the bullies that we've always been, but now we have to be outwardly bullying to not let the UN or anybody else push us around.
yeah, there's a better way. Yeah, the lack of diplomacy, the disrespect to our allies, just I mean, the greatest weapon that the United States has ever created, the greatest national security defensive weapon that we have is not the nuclear weapon, and it's not our submarines, and it's not our tanks. It's our network of allies. That's why we're so powerful. And we should cherish that, and we should respect our allies, even if they've been taking advantage with, let's say their own paying for their own defense. But that's a negotiation that can take place at a table respectfully, diplomatically. I think we should really maintain and try to strengthen those relationships, especially when we live in a world where China is competing with us for those relationships. And now you see what Canada is saying, and you see other countries, like you look at, when Russia attacked and Germany's gas was coming from Russia, and there was a whole problem there. Like I don't think we should do anything to encourage any of our allies to think that they need to turn to the likes of China or Russia for anything. But Trump doesn't seem to care about that. He seems perfectly willing to push allies away and offend them, and in ways that I think is really dangerous for us personally. If you just want to be completely selfish about it and say, I don't care about the rest of the world, I don't care where anywhere else looks like, even for us, that's dangerous. We should not be doing that. So yeah, I the rhetoric is a big problem, the lack of diplomacy. Yeah, but going back to one of my earlier points, the rhetoric on both sides is really, what specifically, like when we're looking at Minnesota, the piece that I wrote recently for on my Substack, The Radicalist, is one of the points that I made is that I see bad rhetoric all around, turning up the temperature all around. You know, Trump talking the way that he does and calling people domestic terrorists, but then, Waltz saying that ICE are a bunch of Nazis. I mean, I don't see anyone in the game there in that situation who's trying to calm things down and keep people safe. And at the end of the day, that's what matters most to me is that people are safe, on both sides, and illegal immigrants. And, just the whole thing is a powder keg.
What about the moral high ground? As goofy as McCain was, he was the guy that said, Israelis don't torture, so why should we? And now there's evidence that everybody's been torturing all along. But at least it was like you're saying, lip service, or it was, I've been through torture myself. We should never do that to our enemies because then they're going to do worse things to us. And invading another country or taking down a dictator for whatever reason, it should be, I'm sure you're not going to agree, but it should be a Congress thing. It should be methodical. We have to show in court the evidence that he's smuggling weapons or whatever the hell Trump made up, like, or that the Venezuelan people need to be free or whatever. Like, there's been such lack of regard for the optics, and the optics are we're the tough ones is worse than George Bush saying, "I rather them fear us than you know disrespect us or whatever." So this idea that he's like a Nixon-like character that he wants to show that he has no cowardice, so he's going to keep sending troops to Vietnam. And now he says he's a peacemaker, but there's still wars going on, but somehow he stopped them because he thinks he did. Like everything that Trump does makes very little sense, but the right keeps saying that he has a master plan. He's just misunderstood, and that at the end it's all going to work out. And I don't see it working out. I see it getting worse. So that's where us progressives get to the point where it's like, enough of the excuses. I appreciate you taking a, a more middle ground approach where you're saying that if the rhetoric is messed up, then it's easier to question his motives. And then the problem with Trump is that he's very honest. He'll say exactly what he wants. I want casinos in Gaza. I want the oil to be used by America because not the Chinese or the Russians are going to use it. So he puts everything on the table, and that's why some people like him and respect him. But the problem is that, like I said, I don't think he's that clever or clever enough to be a dictator, because then he'll take it back, or he's worried that people don't like him, so then he tries to do something else to get their attention. And like a lot of us feel, and I know you might not agree, that a lot of these things are distractions to get away from the whole Epstein thing and from the being accountable for his own actions. So, are you in the last 8 minutes, 5 minutes? Do you feel that the whole Epstein thing has been something that has been holding him back or causing him to do erratic things? Or it's gonna so complicated. We need to have the lawyers look at it. That it's just gonna be ongoing, and no one is ever gonna find out the truth about it.
Yeah, I don't think I have any brilliant insights on the Epstein thing. It's just it's a big Gordian knot of conspiracy theories and half truths, and I don't know. I mean, I think most of the analysis that I hear from the left about that is based largely on just armchair psychoanalyzing Trump and the kind of person that people think he is, and then whether or not they think that he's therefore likely to have done something. And then also, you know, he's made some comments in his life about various young girls and distasteful comments, and people put those things together as well. And so, but I don't really have any insights into the how the Epstein files. I mean, I'm certainly interested. Now, whether or not he's trying to distract people from that, I don't know. I think that's it's an interesting theory, but I don't have enough information to have an opinion on that. And if I did have an opinion, it wouldn't be informed.
So
So
so the other guest said that he has dirt on everyone, and they're scared of him, so now he can get his agenda done. And that's why he was kind of being weird about not letting the information out, because he's using it against his enemies. And that's like an Alex Jones thing that he's always one step ahead of everyone. And again, he's not that clever, or if he is, it's all for his ego. So
he's got something. I mean, people say he's not that clever. I don't know. He certainly says things where you just want to slap yourself. It's just like, oh my gosh, that is, how could you say that? But on the other hand, he managed to thrive in an extremely cutthroat industry of media, and also in politics, and rise to the most competitive position in the world. So he understands, he has some insights. Obviously, he's been successful in these areas. Um, so there's something there, you know. A lot of people have tried to become president, and Trump has managed to do so twice now. So I think he has a talent for tapping into or riding the wave, you might say, of a certain demographic of sentiment in the American public. And he seen one of his talents seems to be he eats off the left's plate a lot. You know, he'll find an issue. I think it was Thomas Chatterton Williams who said this, that he's really good at identifying problems that the left has long ignored. It's just his solutions that are the problem. Like we don't like the solutions that he comes up with, but he identifies the right problems. He identifies things that so he was big when he was first elected. He was big on pushing back against PC culture and being pro free speech. And he also talked a lot about free speech when he was running the second time. Now, we haven't exactly seen a very good record on free speech from the Trump administration. Very much the opposite. But he did correctly identify that the left had sort of abandoned that issue with the cancel culture regime and all of the wokeness. There's a lot of there's a and support for hate speech legislation and things of that nature. It doesn't seem like the left is as pro free speech as they used to be. When I was a kid, the left was very pro free speech, and so he seems to have that talent, at least identifying an issue that the left just won't address, and then he addresses it, but the way he addresses it is very problematic.
But I want to get back to that and back to my
Mm-hmm.
Mexican problem, because now it's not the Jewish problem, now it's the Mexican problem. So when he started his campaign to run for president, he went after the Mexican community and he said, they're bringing the worst, they're bringing the rapists, the murderers, and the thieves.
Mm.
And instead of addressing the original issue that I brought up, is that the Mexican culture has been corrupt since the Spanish times, and Mexico is twice as old as the US is. So maybe that's where the US is heading to become unsustainable mess because of the slave trade, the caste system, the occupation and destruction of the place. And then it was the locals, the mixed people, the mestizos, and the Spanish colonizers. They all came together and they kicked the Spanish out. But then there's been a lot of infighting, a lot of problems and revolutions, stuff like that. So instead of saying Mexico has a cultural problem, or Mexico has this inability to manage their own problems, and now we have to deal with their problems. He went straight to the Mexicans. It's kind of
Yeah.
like in the New Testament, the Jews. So to me, he found a problem, and it wasn't not only the solution that was evil, it was the way it was framed as
His
like
rhetoric. Yeah, his rhetoric
as a
is.
racist or xenophobic or anti-Mexican diatribe to portray all of us Mexicans as the ones causing the issues to the American society.
I don't
When
think
the
it's
American
racist,
society has so
but
many other issues and is scapegoating. So if you get the master scapegoater like Hitler, now you get a new master scapegoater where he's going against the democratic cities, he's going against the Somalis, he's going against, and you can say that because there's so much resentment because of cultural changes or
mm,
white people are not reproducing stuff like that. That's how you get in power. You get people to use their anger and their frustration against people that are not organized or people that don't have much of a voice. And
yeah.
that's how you build a dictatorship or fascist regime or whatever. So we can disagree, but come on, man.
Which part? Come on, man. About which part?
That he found a problem, he framed it in a screwed up way, and then he now is full force keeping his promise. He's saying we need to get the Mexicans out, and of course he's saying not all Mexicans. There are some who are nice, but the ones who are here illegally and who are causing problems. And now we're
Oh,
gonna go and
well, if he's well, I mean, do you have a problem with that? If you're if the proposition is let's get rid of people who are here illegally and causing problems, I support that. If he's saying not all Mexicans, just the ones who are causing problems, by which I assume you mean breaking the law, hurting people, violent criminals, I support that. get the violent criminals out of here. In fact, I'm fine getting them out of here, even if they're not violent criminals. Just like I said earlier, if I go to Japan and I am there legally and they deport me, I'm not going to turn around and say, "Oh, they're such horrible people. They're so racist." I'm like, no, they're just enforcing their immigration law, which is what most countries do.
If the president of Japan said the reason we're coming against the gringos that came in here illegally is because they're horrible people and they're destroying our society, that's taking it too far. And you know what? You've done great because the guy that will be playing next week, he was saying that black people need to be deported to Liberia who misbehave, and pretty much
What
he
black people? What American citizens should be
yeah, and
deported
then
to
and then
Liberia?
he was saying that
Who
in a
said
sense,
this?
Jews who are too progressive and want to change the American makeup into more Muslims through Hayas and all that, they should be sent to Israel or wherever else. And I said,
Who are
well, what
too
about the
progressive?
huh?
Oh my God.
And
Who?
and
Yeah.
then what about white people? If white people misbehave, should they be sent off back to Poland or
Yeah, yeah,
whatever?
yeah. And what do you
And he
say?
wasn't willing to agree with that one. So
Oh,
so he was going
interesting.
like Nick Fuentes style perspective. But hey, we'll leave it at that for this time around. I appreciate you sparring with me about all these different things.
Yeah.
At the end, we have no power. They're going to do whatever they're going to do, but at least they're accountable to us, and that's what I don't understand.
I was going to say, we do have power. Yeah, I agree with you. They're accountable to us. I mean, the midterms are coming, and projections say that the Democrats are looking pretty good. And what does a lame duck Trump presidency look like? Well, we might find out, and it might be interesting to see that. At the same time, I think that he has received funding for his ICE operations enough to last throughout the year. So we might still be reading headlines from Minnesota around Christmas. So people who think that this is going to be over in a month or two, I don't think that's true. I think we're going to be seeing this for a while. On the other hand, he was elected to do that. I hope nobody else gets hurt.
Next time, we're going to talk about how we have a poop sandwich or a turd burger, because the Democrats and the Republicans they really have no solutions other than pinning the problem on each other. And my
Yeah,
theory
yeah.
is that the reason that they allowed a bunch of immigrants in during the Democratic regime was to fundraise as we're not the racist ones, and then the other guys were able to mobilize people as we are the ones that don't want these people here.
Mm,
So they fundraise against each other, and they use poor people, minorities, immigrants as
yeah,
pawns in their battle for power. So
yeah. And the immigrants who come here are not served by this, and the American people are not served by this. It's you know, and also there's this division that we all know in our society. I don't want to be hyperbolic. I don't want to say like the Civil War 2.0 is coming, but there is a great division that is maybe greater than anything that we've seen in our country since maybe the 1960s. And uh you know our, the narratives on both sides are just so black and white against the other side. I think we really need to get back to a place where we can, uh, as we're doing right now, have a civil disagreement with someone who you don't see eye to eye with on every political issue, but it doesn't fracture that bond. It doesn't make it impossible for you to have that conversation with that person. To as I like to say, have a beer with someone who is a political enemy. You're a Democrat. Can we still, as a nation, sit down with, how many progressives would be willing to interact with someone who's MAGA or vice versa? It just seems like we see each other not as fellow citizens, but as enemies, and that turns me off. I think that's a real problem.
and although I'm registered as a Democrat, I am not a Democrat. I'm a Green, and even then, I have issues with them too. So being independent is it's a hard place to be in America. So okay, brother.
Well, thank you for your time.
Blessings, brother. Take care.
Thanks. Yeah.